Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. It is noon Eastern here in Tampa, Florida. And my name is Barbie Winterbottom. I am the host here of The Table. And I thank every one of you for joining us. I know it takes a few minutes for folks to jump on. I believe we're going to have a pretty robust conversation today. So I want to jump right in myself by introducing my guests so that we can start our conversation. As always, we love as much interaction as possible. So when you're joining us, please comment and let us know that you're here. And if you have questions or comments throughout our conversation, please also share them and we will see them. I do my best to bring comments across into the conversation, as well as any questions you might have. And lastly, if you're not able to see this live, always remember that I do upload all of the table sessions onto my YouTube channel. And if you would take a moment to subscribe to that, I would greatly appreciate it. And we do this for all of you in our audience because we want to bring as much value and education and great conversation as we can. So without further ado, I will introduce my partner in crime over here, Miss Sam Eaton, who sits in the UK right now, and she has an amazing consulting business, and she helps people like me who are HR consultants and help transform the world of work. So Sam, thank you for being here, and thank you for partnering with me in today's episode and for bringing our amazing guest. I feel like we're on the Brady Bunch. Welcome, Steve Cadigan. Steve is the author of an amazing new book, WORKQUAKE. If you have not had a chance to read it, I highly encourage you to grab it. I have the audio book, or I would show it to you. And I always order the hardback after I finish the audiobook so I can go back and take notes. It's absolutely phenomenal. I'm so excited he's here. He has a couple of claims to fame. He was also the very first CHRO at LinkedIn, which is pretty cool when you think about the impact LinkedIn has had on the world, and his involvement in growing this organization is pretty wonderful. So welcome, Steve. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Barbie, for having me. Sam, good to see you.
Likewise. So I know I've been joshing you and jesting you for a week about your book, but like I said, it's genuinely for me gone right up there as a book that anyone in the HR space should read. The way you've brought the whole story together was phenomenal, both from the employee perspective and the employer perspective. And I'd love to hear more about that.
Absolutely. And I will piggyback on that to say not only HR, but talent acquisition, because a lot of organizations don't have TA and HR in the same space. So some folks, if they're in TA, they don't consider themselves part of the HR group. And I would say if you're in HR and or talent acquisition, this book is something you need to read because it will really help you reframe your approach going forward if you're not already in this mindset. Because the nuggets that Steve will share with us today and throughout the pages of the book are truly transformative and will challenge you to think about the way you're doing your work now and how it will propel you and your organization into the future. So with that, Steve, I would love for you to, let's start off with kind of sharing a little bit about your career journey. I know early in the book you talk about going to a kid's birthday party and getting the biggest job of your life out of it, which I think is just fantastic. So kind of share with us your career journey and then what really prompted you or inspired you to write WORKQUAKE, and walk us through that so that our audience can understand your inspiration.
Great, Barbie. Happy to do that. And let me start with university. You know, I went to university and graduated from university without having an absolute clue about what I wanted to do with my life. I had no idea. My father's a minister. My mother is a social worker helping communities build daycare centers and trying to find ways for daycare for parents to be affordable. And all I knew, I didn't want to do what they were doing when I finished school. All the men in my father's side of the family were all ordained Episcopal ministers. And while I have great reverence for that career path, it wasn't really something that inspired me. So I was a history major. I graduated. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was in a relationship with someone living in California. So I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, and I've been in the West Coast most of my life since I moved. I had a chance to, in college, before I graduated, interview with one company on campus, and that was a fashion company. You could probably tell, in terms of how I dress, high sense of fashion. No, not really. And that company was called Esprit, and Esprit had a really great offer to hire you with a very young employee base and move you around. So I said, what I should probably choose to do is find a company where I could try different things. So I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I was really good at. I didn't know what I would be interested in doing. So I wanted to go to a place where I could have choice and opportunity. And so that was what led me to accept a job offer at Esprit to be a credit and collections analyst. And after doing that for about and I was really good at collecting money. Let me tell you, I was really good at that. And what I learned very quickly was collecting money is less about being rough and aggressive and analytical and more about building relationships with people, and then closing the relationship call by saying, my boss says you owe us some money. Can you help me out? And so forth. After about a year of doing that, I realized I didn't see anyone above me in the credit analyst universe that I wanted to be like. And I was ready for a new rotation. So they moved me to human resources. And I was like, wait a second, I get to interview people. I was a recruiter. You get to interview people all day. You're going to pay me for that? And then I get to try to figure out who's good on what team and how that works. And so here I am around age 23, and I fell in love. I just fell in love with the profession of what human resources I found out for me had was everything I loved about sport. I'm a huge sports fan. I love competition. I'm very competitive, but I also love seeing how people respond in different situations, how they respond to victory, how they respond to defeat, how they respond to being behind, how they respond to pressure, how they respond to different coaching styles. And that served me really well. I never thought all those hours I had in college in the gymnasium were going to really benefit me, but they really did. And so from the fashion industry, after being there for about 4 years, I went to the insurance industry. I took on a higher level position in human resources. I went from just recruiting to more generalist work. And now you're getting into employee relations and compensation and communication and dispute resolution, getting a little bit into labor law. It was really great. And when I went from a smaller to a bigger company, I found out that there were more experts in a bigger company. So I could dabble a little bit deeper in different dimensions of human resources to help me understand, a little bit more like, do I really want to do this as a profession? So after about 4 years in the insurance, I got a call from a headhunter to go to Silicon Valley. And I thought all tech companies were the same, high tech. I found out later they're very, very big differences between different kinds of companies. But I went to Silicon Valley in '94 as a generalist for a company called AMD. They're in the semiconductor business. And what was striking to me in making that move was I went from a company where insurance, where we would have a meeting to decide who's going to come to the meeting, to high tech, where we would meet someone in the hallway, have a meeting real time, make a decision, and then we would go back and implement the decision. It was just so dynamic. And I fell in love with the dynamism and the openness of, especially around talent strategies, to trying new things. Because the market for talent was so competitive. In the insurance industry, you wouldn't get poached. You hardly ever lost anybody. And people never left a company unless they retired or they died. And in technology, my network exploded. And so after being at AMD about 4 years, I had friends and colleagues who'd moved on to almost every company that you can think of in Silicon Valley. And that was cool because you get to learn from them. Around that time, Barbie, I decided I wanted to do HR for the rest of my life. I said, I want to do this and I want to be really good at it. So I went and got a master's degree at University of San Francisco. My coffee's just arrived. Thank you. And that really, I think, helped me sort of sharpen my sword a little bit and gain a little bit more confidence around my craft, and also realize that human resources as a profession is very new. It hasn't been around, very long. And so some of the first experiments, like the Hawthorne experiment and some other ones, it was just really good for me to call BS on a lot of leadership theories or a lot of theories that some of my managers would say. I'm like, no, there's nothing behind that theory. And so that was really helpful. After 4 years being that company, I had an opportunity of a lifetime to go to a company that was on the move at the time called Cisco Systems. And the first year I was there, we actually realized being the most valuable company on the planet. I don't know if anyone knows that, but it was like for 2 days. And I was doing mergers and acquisitions around the world, which I love. I'm not sure if you guys have touched that in your career arc, but it is the greatest period of organizational change and velocity that anyone can go through. If you're or getting acquired, do I have a job? Am I going to, be relocated? Is my comp going to change? And all these things. And I fell in love with that. And as a human resource leader, what I really liked about it was there was a beginning, middle, and an end. The acquisition's done. We move on to another one. And in a lot of work, it's really just farming. And you're farming season after season, and you're trying to get your crops to be better performing, right? And there's no sense of completion sometimes. And I really like that. M&A gave me that. After a few years there, the dot-com bubble burst and my job went away. And the company asked me what I wanted to do. And I said, I would love to go to Europe. And they said, well, how about Singapore? We've got a head of HR for Asia open. I said, how about Amsterdam, London, Milan? They said, how about Singapore? I said, okay, got the message. I guess I'm going to Singapore. So I took my first international assignment, ran HR there for 2 years. After 2 years came up, they wanted me to come back to expensive land, which I call California. And I said, no way. I don't want to do that. So I applied and was accepted for a job in Canada. And I moved to be my first ever head of HR for a small company. It was Fortune 500. But their big supplier was Cisco, and they were trying to expand in Asia. So, and I was really reluctant, honestly, Barbie. Like, I very rarely in my career had seen someone who's running HR that I wanted to be like. And I'd seen, and sadly, I think this is true about our profession, more people, business leaders, know more what they don't want from HR than what they do want. And that's sad. We talked a little bit off air around some of the realities that great HR is done when you have great HR leaders that have great people sensibilities, not because you have just a great HR leader, but a great HR leader that can bring out those people sensibilities is really powerful. And right around when I went to grad school, going back a little bit, I did have a couple of mentors. I'm like, wow, okay, there's some really cool people that I see that I do want to be like, okay, I'm going to go forward. And I was thinking, like, should I just major in M&A integration? I could go work for some consulting firm and just do this full time, because there's really an adrenaline rush when you're working on these M&As. So after Asia, I got convinced to be a head of HR. I was like, I don't know. I've never dealt with a board of directors, and I don't understand all this, executive comp stuff. I'm not sure I'm really your right person. And
nobody
they said,
else does either. It's okay.
Yeah. And so they convinced me. And I said, okay. And so I took that, had a great run. Again, for me, the magic number is 4 years. After about 4 years, my boss, the CEO, who was like as much of a brother as he was a boss, we went through some really hard times, had to close a lot of offices. After the dot-com bubble burst, it was hard times for tech companies because they'd been valued, and your employees on a spreadsheet, if their options had vested, would have been millionaires, and then that just went away, and it was hard. And so the morale was tough, and laying people off never builds morale. It's just really, really brutal. So he retired, and around the same time, a company in California came after me, Electronic Arts video game company, and said, would you like to come back to the US? And I said, I absolutely would not like to do that. And then they showed me the magic number, and I said, oh, you're going to pay me that much to come back to the US? I said, okay. And at that point, I had 3 kids, 2 born in Canada and 1 born in Singapore. All made in America. I should let the record reflect. But so they moved me back to the U.S. And originally I was in the chair of it was going to be part M&A and part generalist work. And I wasn't the HR. I was going to be number 2 or 3. I wasn't the top HR person there. And what happened was the 2008 second mortgage crisis hit, and the M&A strategy completely stopped. My job got way less interesting. And around that time, I went to a kid's birthday party. And as you referenced, Barbie, I ran into someone there who was working at LinkedIn, and I helped him navigate his job offer from LinkedIn. And a few weeks later, he called me and said they're looking for their first head of HR. And I said, yeah, no, I'm fine. I wasn't really liking electronic arts. So he really pushed me. He's like, no, you have to do this. And I said, okay, sure. Well, I interviewed there. And I couldn't sleep for 2 weeks. I was so excited. And as you can probably figure out, I mean, what's wonderful about a job like the one at LinkedIn is not only are you practicing your craft, but you're a product advisor. You're a sales consultant because they're selling to your peers around the world. I got to go into the boardrooms of Walmart, JP Morgan. I mean, you name it, all these huge companies around the world. And talk to them about their talent strategies and grow my network and do really interesting things and help our product and engineering teams address, parts of my craft that needed, LinkedIn's help. So that was really, really enthralling. About 4 years later, we went from 400 to 4,000. We went through an IPO. We went from 2 countries to 17 countries and from employees, just in a few companies to employees all over the world. I was absolutely exhausted. And I was the only executive on the team that had small kids, 3 of them. And I was feeling like that guilt, I think, parental guilt. And also we'd realized just enormous success as a business that I'd built the financial freedom to be able to do whatever I wanted to do. So I decided to step away. I had no plans. I just walked into my office one day and my boss comes in. He goes, "You don't look good." I go, "Yeah, I think I want to leave." He goes, "What?" I said, "Yeah, I think I'm done." He's like, "What? I did not see that coming." I said, "Yeah, me neither. But I've been coming to work for a few months and I've just not been enjoying it." And, there's a moment I think we all hit where when a company fundamentally changes from 400 to 4,000, the kind of work you're doing is just different. And I felt more removed from really problem solving. I love leading people, don't get me wrong. But where I really find joy is that one-on-one, helping someone untangle themselves or their team if they're really tangled. And so I left, and that was about 8 years ago. I reconnected with hundreds of people that I'd worked with over the course of my career that I was too busy to keep in touch with. And during that period of probably a year, I was able to distill what the market was asking for, a lot of help building people strategies. And so that's what I've been up to for the last 8 years, and small companies, big companies, tech companies, you name it, but especially people who are growing really fast like we did and trying to compete with really sexy brands for talent in the world. And so that leads to the second part of the question. So what led you to write the book? Well, I've had a pretty great opportunity to speak at universities and conferences and companies around the world. And whenever I get off stage, people go, "Hey, where's your book?" And I go, "Right here." And so they're like, "You got to write that down." And so my friends, my family, my wife were like, "You got to do this, you got to write it." And I was like, okay. And I'm the master of procrastination. It's like, if anyone can procrastinate, I know how to do it really well. Like, I'll get to that after I watch the football match, or I'll get to it after we take the kids to, a sports event or something. And so I hired a ghostwriter to help me get jump started. I was really good at outlining, but I wasn't good at the first draft. And he would first draft, and then I would second draft, and I would finish it. So it was really great to have that support. And finished the book right before COVID hit. And it was all around the future of work, as Sam, you hinted at in the introduction, and just trying to help people. And what inspired me to do that was not just like, "Hey, where's your book?" But it was also this sense of like, I've spent most of my life like fixing stuff that's broken in companies, and fixing faulty leadership strategies, or things that career paths that are just broken. For example, like the one problem every company has is you promote the technician who's really good at something, failing to recognize they might not be good at managing people, which we would never have known as an individual contributor. So then we put them in the leadership role, they fail, they think they're a failure, and now it's cleanup mode, and not failing to recognize that we need a technical path and we need a leadership path. And not everyone is suited for that opportunity, So I wanted to try to sort of find a way to sort of build hope. The second thing that was really important to me was that all the narrative that I've seen around the future of work is gloom and doom. Robots are coming. Half the jobs tomorrow don't even exist today. Good luck figuring out what skills to study. And I'm like, that's just fundamentally demotivating and uninspiring. And I think the future can be really inspiring, but we need to have a different conversation. So I was super excited when Sam found me and she's like, I like this conversation. I want to be part of it. And that's why I was excited to talk to you guys today to dive into this a little more.
Well, thank you.
I know, we're both, what?
Well, it's so wonderful to have someone on the show who talks as much as me. I love it because you have just such an amazing history. Your career has taken so many different turns, like many of us, I think, who find ourselves in the people space, right? I didn't go to school for HR on my first round either, right? I was a voice performance major. And also, like you, I started off in the recruiting and talent acquisition space and then kind of grew from there into, the CHRO seat eventually. And it's amazing, I think, when you do take different twists and turns and different industries and different types of organizations, from startups to, worldwide, 200,000 employees and up, you get such a great perspective that a lot of folks don't get when they've been in one place or one industry for most of their career. So I love that we have some of that in common, and that it's helped you frame your recommendations and what you're seeing, and helping us to look at the future differently. And to your point, it's not all gloom and doom. It is true, I believe, that 50% of the jobs that will exist 5 and 10 years from now don't exist today. But if we look back 10 years, it's the same thing, right? Would we have ever said that someone's going to make a living making videos on YouTube? No, we wouldn't have. But that's a huge career for many people now. So we have to kind of put it in some context that, yes, it is going to continue to evolve and change, but are we able to adapt to that or not? That's the question. The question isn't whether it's going to happen, because it is going to happen. It's already happened. But what are we going to do to meet the challenge, and how can we prepare ourselves to get there? So I love everything about your framework here. Sam, I don't want to cut you off. I think you've got something you want to add. So go ahead.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, it just reinforces, I come from a very different world of work to get here, in that I trained as a bilingual secretary. Academia came to me later in life. I'm still only 25, obviously. So things that you say in that book, I started in a typing pool and I worked my way up. I'm very fortunate I've now had 5 businesses. I've learned the world of HR, and I taught the world of HR, and I understand the strategies. But everything you said in that book really, for me, was really profound, because I think people should have an understanding across the businesses rather than just stay in that lane. Otherwise, how do you understand where that pattern change is? How do you understand that accountability? It's not just this piece of paper here, but who gave it to you and where does it go from there? It's more than just this one piece. And that's going to become more and more fundamental the more we embrace this work from anywhere, because this work from anywhere is here and has been for 20 years. It's just now we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, listening to both of you, so we have in the United States, as you may know, right now, since we've been measuring voluntary resignations, 3% of the workforce in the month of August resigned. 43 million people, the highest number since we've been tracking it, and it's been growing June, July, August. And so when we're telling the workforce for the last 30 years, hey, half the jobs in the future don't exist. Hey, we're going to go through a digital transformation. Hey, you need to upskill, you need to reskill. And when they're not coming back to work, how can that be surprising to you as a leader? Like, are you really surprised that people are pausing, going, I better make a good choice here, because things are really changing. And I've got a moment in time where I've got an opportunity to maybe change my direction, change my path. I'm going to hit pause because you companies and you media have scared the devil out of me. And I'm going to be more thoughtful when I come back, how I want to work, where I want to work, who I want to work with. And I've learned during the pandemic, I really value my freedom, autonomy, and independence. And I've proven to you, even though you won't tell me, most of you business leaders, that I can be as or more productive for you. But you feel still uncomfortable, businesses, unless I'm actually in your facility. One of the coolest bits of data that's come out, and we're still waiting for all this really interesting information to come about how work's happening during the pandemic. But Gallup, who is the company that measures engagement, has just published their first report of engagement during the pandemic. And guess what? Engagement's rising. And now what's interesting to me is, so wait a second, you're telling me engagement's rising when people are in their companies less, but doing work. They're feeling more engaged with the company that they're less physically in that environment with. Yes. Isn't that interesting? Now, we don't know the causes of that yet, but I think we can surmise it's probably due to greater freedom and flexibility, right? And so that's why, I mean, Barbie and Sam, I think, like, I want this book to really help people see, don't look at the pandemic as a one-time event, as a situation. This is the world that we are going to be in, not as crazy and dramatic as the pandemic has served us, but as a moment where things are constantly going to be changing, and your ability to weather that as an organization and as an individual is going to really determine your vitality in the future. Right. Yeah. And here we are, 19 months into the pandemic as we're recording this today. And I still feel most business leaders, sadly, are just hitting the point now where like, I guess we're not going to go back to the way we were. I guess we better start preparing ourselves for, well, we've had the Delta virus. Maybe we're going to have the United Airlines virus or the American Airlines virus next, but maybe we've got to just prepare ourselves that this is the new normal, which is never normal. And learn to be agile and learn to communicate differently and learn to leverage new pools of talent and find ways of thriving in something that feels fundamentally uncomfortable based on what we knew. But maybe that is something that will be the way that we have to face going forward, right?
I agree. And, I think about two scenarios. One of my clients I work with today, they're really struggling with the hybrid or work at home model, and their CEO just cannot wrap their head around people working remotely indefinitely, and trying to influence that individual to see it is going, it's mind-boggling to me that we're having this conversation even now when they're losing talent because people know they have choices. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Steve, that I found really insightful, and when I mentioned how I think TA leaders really need to read your book, is the concept of when we look at recruitment marketing and when we look at attracting talent to an organization, which every organization on the planet now is fighting for talent in a way that they haven't ever had to before, I think, or at least in the last 10 years. But your recommendation is not to try to attract talent to build the rest of your career with us. It's come here so we can help you build a career wherever you want to go. And I personally love this. And it's kind of the way I've led for my entire career. I've helped my own employees interview and get jobs elsewhere because it was what was right for them and their journey and their career. But not everybody shares that. And I love how you present this concept and how you've experienced this concept throughout your career. So I'd love for you to give us some more detail around that, because I think this is a really critical message that organizations need to absorb and understand, that recruitment marketing and talent acquisition and talent attraction of today and the future has to look different than it has in the past, or we are not going to resonate with candidates.
Right. So let me follow the logic trail that sort of got me to this point. And again, I'm not excited to be able to tell people, guess what, the labor force is going to be more and more fluid, but it's just a fact. And so if we look at the trends of talent, they're staying in organizations less. Everywhere I go, every industry, every country, every geography, do you think people are going to continue to leave companies faster? Yes. Okay. So the first thing is, you got to ask yourself, okay, if I can't change that, and it's not me, it's the workforce sees more opportunity and they're acting on having more choice and opportunity. That's a beautiful thing. Well, what that means is I need to start shifting how I think about work here in terms of expect people will leave, not try to pretend that they won't. And most goals for most leaders and HR leaders are still indexed off of, keep the turnover low, keep engagement high. And even though everyone believes people are still going to leave faster in the future than they do today. So what I'm trying to help people understand is, listen, let's have a bigger conversation. This is part of my desire with the book. Let's have a more enlightened, honest, real conversation. We know you're going to go. So let's, when you start, talk about where do you want to be when you do leave so that I can optimally prepare you. And this is a little bit of the cognitive dissonance. We've spent most of our lives as recruiters selling the vision, the mission, like we are this and our company does this. And I think that's still important, but I think the first part of the conversation needs to be, hey, candidate, what's your vision? What's your mission? What are your values? Where do you want to go? And I need to understand what's on your mind, because if you're looking to get somewhere else that my company can't take you, then this probably isn't the right place for you. And that's really, really important. And it's a bigger conversation. Caring about someone for their career is far deeper and more meaningful than just caring about them when they work for you. And again, I'm the first one to say, I've done that most of my career. I was just like, I only care about you when you're here. And I don't think you can do that anymore. I really don't. And here's another thing that a lot of people fail to see. If you play the future out, okay, do you believe people are leaving faster? Yes, I do. Do you believe that's going to continue? Yes, I do. Okay, so then you are going to have more alumni in your company than you've ever had. So what are you doing with that alumni? Are you curating it, nurturing it, building it as a force of positive in your future to maybe get boomerang employees and have them come back, or have them refer people to you, or maybe give you product advice or ideas or brainstorm problems that you come up? And most organizations know once you leave, I call it the Tony Soprano School of HR. You quit, you're dead to me. Like that. Why? People phone. They're your public relations firm, whether they work with you or they don't. And so caring about someone for their whole year is far more, I think, compelling. But that goes to grain of what we've taught, right? Which is, why would I develop you? Because then you're just going to leave. Well, folks, they're leaving anyway. Yeah. So, exactly. If they're going to leave anyway, make them better, and then they'll be a more positive force for you in the future. I was having this conversation. I was at a conference last night, and I met this gentleman who is in charge of manufacturing, and he's got 1,000 employees. And he goes, Steve, some of my employees, it takes them 6 years to learn how to work this machine. And I said, well, I'm really sorry to tell you. And I said, so let me guess, they leave after 8 years? After they learn how to do it, then they go somewhere else because they're going to pay more. He goes, yeah. I said, well, why? Why don't you change what it takes to operate that job to something shorter? Because you're only going to continue to be disappointed. That is the definition of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting a different result. If you know they're going to leave, and all the data says it's not you, it's not your breath, it's not your personality, it's not your company, it's the reality that people have more choice. So we need to re-engineer, and this is where things can get really deep and really uncomfortable for a leader like this head of manufacturing. You're going to need to build your jobs differently to account for people. Like if it takes 6 years and they leave after 7, you've designed it wrong. No job takes 6 years to learn, in theory. I mean, I'm sure if we're putting someone on the moon, or lives are on the line, okay, fine.
Brain surgery, maybe. Yes.
Right. So, and I don't want lots of turnover there, of course, because lives are on the line. But there's ways of architecting work differently, so that maybe there's pieces of that job that don't need to be owned by one person taking 6 years to learn. And then, so what that leader's thinking, what they're not articulating is, that's hard. I don't know that I can do that. I'm like, yes, you can do that, or you can build a different machine, that does different things. So it's just, we have been programmed, and I'm as guilty as the next person, to see the world of jobs and work differently. And that's why I'm trying to say, people, we need to look at this really, really differently. And I was telling this leader, I really believe the recruiting slogan of the future is, please come here and join my company so I can help you leave it. People
yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
I love that.
Come join it. I will be in your corner the rest of your career. Isn't that more powerful and magnetic and drawing people in than, I'm going to care about you until you quit, and then I pretty much won't talk to you ever again?
Yep.
And actually, on that, the piece that when you were talking about that, you're embracing that whole person, specifically around their hobbies, their creativity, helping them have inside gigs. And I've ordered that book, by the way, because I hadn't heard of that before either, and that fascinated me. But all of that's here now, and that again gets us back onto that playing field where you can help me, employer, and I can help you, employee, and vice versa. And isn't that a more refreshing relationship to have?
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's two things. One, I think you're so spot on, Steve, with we have looked at jobs as this, this is the job and it's in this box and this is the job and this is always going to be the job, right? Instead of looking at new and creative ways to, as you said, to architect that job, maybe it's three people who do that job in different ways instead of one person who takes 6 years. I would burn out on the 6 years of trying to learn something, by the way. If I couldn't learn it in 6 months or less, peace out. That would not be for me. But I think another element that has contributed to people moving on is that organizations have married themselves to these very, very rigid internal compensation structures and policies that people can only earn, the rule of thumb, right, is 10%. If you get promoted, you can only increase your comp by no more than 10% with internal movement, right? And in every large organization I've worked in, that's been the number, it's no more than 10%. And if it exceeds 10%, then we would keep their salary level, do a bonus at the end of the year to make up for the difference or what have you. But I think we're smart people and we recognize that, okay, if you're only going to increase my compensation by this much, no matter what promotion I get, but if I leave, I can get an increase of 20% or 25% or who knows what in today's market. And then maybe I'll come back. And then you're going to have to hire me and pay me that higher level because I've shown you that I can leave and come back. And now because it's not internal movement, you'll pay me what I'm worth. So I think there's another element that we have to really look at is breaking down this very staid compensation philosophy that doesn't allow a dynamic movement of people and reward for the talent they bring. And I don't know if you've seen that or not. Do you feel like that's contributing to some of this as well?
There's so many pieces of it, Barbie. I mean, compensation structures, job family expectations. I mean, I've worked in companies where you can't apply for another job until you've been in your job for a year. I mean, there's so much architecture. And that's just inside a corporation. I mean, we haven't even gone yet to governmental, limitations around, gig work is going to be impeded because affordable health care in the United States when you don't have an employer is really, is problematic, or trying to getting a refinance on your home when you don't have an employer is really hard. But one of the, there's a couple of pieces that you mentioned that I think are worth exploring, but I want to tell you a story of a situation I had a couple of weeks ago, and maybe the audience has got some ideas. Hospitals today are just in a panic because nurses are in high demand. And many nurses have realized, I'm out. Like, this is just far more people, are not caring about the stress that I'm under. I'm working crazy hours. And the number of people who want to be nurses, or the available inventory, is really, really low. So we're getting burnout all over the place. And nurses are starting to see that, hey, if I become a travel nurse, I can make 50 to 100% more pay. I lose my flexibility because I've got to fly somewhere and live somewhere else. So I'm on this call with about 4 heads of HR from hospitals, and they look like they need, a vacation like nobody's business. They're tired. They're exhausted. And they're like, how do we solve this problem, Steve? Our nurses are getting 50 to 100% pay increases to go do this travel nurses. And I said, well, have you thought of, raising salaries a little bit? Because I don't think if someone is enticed by a travel opportunity to raise their pay, I don't think you need to match that number to keep them, because there's a lot of equity that they have there, that they've got a rhythm of life, they've got their fitness center, they've got friends and family nearby, they won't have to rent their place out, and it gets very complicated and all kinds of things like that, and they lose the stability of their health insurance and things like that if they're becoming more of a contingent worker. Maybe you only need to go up 25% or 30%. You don't have to match those big numbers, but they're just like, they're like, yeah, I get that, but leadership's not getting that. They won't do that. And so they really feel like they're stuck in these structures, and people sadly seem to be waiting for us to get back to normal.
Yeah.
And that's really hard. And the other thing relative to internal movement, I mean, I speak with everyone around right now, and business leaders are like, what's your biggest problem? I can't hire the people I need fast enough, and they're not staying. And we got a recruiting problem. I said, you don't have a recruiting problem. And any of the listeners today that feel like, oh yeah, we're really struggling to recruit, you really don't have a recruiting problem. I think you have a be creative on how to build value problem. You're assuming you need full-time employees to do everything. And the truth is, there's many combinations of talent that could happen for you to, your goal is to create something of value. And we've been built and conditioned and programmed and built all these financial systems that well, let's forecast the FTEs. That's not the only way. There's many other ways. The other thing that I wonder, and again, I think Europe does this to a small extent, and I think the rest of the world can benefit, is this notion of what's called a secondment, which is, why don't we loan our people in downtimes to companies that have peak periods? Why don't we loan our employees over here so they can learn new things and expand? But no, we have these firm boundaries, organization, that won't allow you to loan someone out to another company. And maybe it's a partner, or maybe it's a customer, and there's goodwill that can really be built. But you very, very rarely see that. And the hard part about in many businesses is it's never like this in terms of your need for talent, right? There's always like up and down, up and down. And so if you can come up with other sources of supply, you can be more creative around how do we build value. Maybe there's a developer team in a different country or something that you could use. But no, we all stick with this. I need a full-time exempt employee to do this job. And we're limiting ourselves, right?
I have a great example of that actually here in the U.S. A company I worked for and they were, we had locations in Minnesota. And our hiring cycle was the exact opposite of another local organization. And we had a contingent workforce. And so they would come and work for us during our peak season. And then en masse, that entire workforce then went and worked for the other organization during their peak season. So these people were employed full-time throughout the entire year at two different companies. And we had an agreement that, we every year we would get together and say, okay, 10% will come this week, 10% will come that week, 10%. And we partnered and collaborated so that both needs were met. We didn't have to go out and do massive recruiting because these folks knew they were welcome here. They were already trained. They might need a little bit of freshening up because certain things could have changed, leaders could have changed or what have you, but they knew the organization, they knew the fundamental aspects of their role. And it was a really great partnership. And I wish more organizations would look at things like that. I think part of the challenge is when I ask TA teams out there, what are your hiring cycles? What are your peak seasons? Oftentimes they don't look at it like that. And so be able to say, okay, well, we really, our peak is here. So we need people 30, 60 days before that to make sure they're ramped up. All of that technical piece often escapes folks because they're in that mindset of we just have to hire FTEs, get them trained, instead of looking at what it could look like in a different format. So I love that recommendation.
Right.
And I've only seen it work once here in the US. But I do think it's a great model if more companies do that.
It's great. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. And let me just pause on this for a second. Any of the listeners, anyone who's listening to this after we publish this, I mean, I've recruited software talent in Silicon Valley for, 15, 20 years, and that is brutally competitive. And what I love about that is it forces you to be creative. It forces you to think differently around this. When we were growing LinkedIn in the 4 years that I was there, we doubled the size of the population. And when you're going through that hyper growth, and I didn't think about, I recognized this honestly 4 or 5 years after I left LinkedIn. What happens in hyper growth is that all your managers, their senior managers, all they're doing is recruiting all the time. They're building a business. We doubled revenues every year that we were growing. And what also happened was, when all the senior leaders are recruiting, guess what? Lieutenants are doing their job. So everyone is getting a virtual promotion doing a higher level job that on paper they're not qualified to do. And the energy that unlocks is so profound, it's hard to capture. Like on paper, they're not qualified to do it. And as recruiters, we all know, have you ever hired someone who's 100% qualified based on the job description of everything that they need to do? It's really rare. Usually they're 60 to 80% have the skills. But if you ask someone, I love doing this. I love playing this game with business leaders. I was like, they say, well, this person's not experienced enough for me to hire them. I said, well, let me ask you a question. When have you had the most energy in your professional career? When you've been doing the same thing for 10, 20 years? Or when you took on something new, a little bit scary? Oh, I said, so think about this. If someone's only 50, 60% qualified and there's a lot unknown, we're tapping into some energy now that may get them more excited, that may make them want to, work a little bit harder, learn a little bit more, make a bigger impact. And that's really sort of untested, tapped energy that I saw at LinkedIn just released at scale, and it's powerful. It is powerful. And people stepped up far more than they fell, in terms of taking on new things. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We're getting some great comments I see below from the listeners. So thank you.
Thank you guys. I appreciate all we love comments and questions. So if you guys have questions for Steve, definitely send them through. Another thing that I really loved about WORKQUAKE is the idea of employees having an entrepreneurial mindset. And when I look at values, my favorite value of all time is own it, or takes ownership, or ownership, whatever. One of my other favorite books is Extreme Ownership. It's all about what Sam was saying earlier about looking upstream and downstream for impact, and what you can do to make sure that things, whatever we're working on comes to fruition. What is your part in all of this? And not just having that myopic view, but having both a macro and a micro view, and being able to flex between the two. And I think if you've ever worked in a startup or had your own business and then you go into a corporate setting, you may have that entrepreneurial mindset. And I use this example pretty frequently, but one of the best hires I have ever made into TA and HR was someone who never worked in HR, never worked in TA. She had her own business for 15 years. And I knew she had the thought process, the approach, the relationship building skills that I needed to run the TA team. And so I brought someone in because I could teach her the tactical elements. What I needed was everything that she already had as a business owner. And by far one of the best hires I've ever made. So when I was reading your book or listening to the audiobook, and you started talking about an entrepreneurial mindset within organizations, I was like, yes, I'm driving down the road and I'm like, yes, people probably think I'm crazy, but I absolutely get so excited by this because you framed it in a way that I hadn't really used that before. I always said, own it, take ownership, drive it through. But your presentation of this concept is so much more eloquent than mine. So tell us a little bit about that and how that can really not only help the individual, but help the organization as well.
Yeah, I think what I was getting at with that perspective is, I think some we over glamorize the entrepreneur and we think, oh, you've got to have a startup company and you've got to go get investors and that is an entrepreneur, but that's just one entrepreneur. And I think the model of work that we've built is we're over controlling people and structure, and we're over because we want to make sure that it's a safe outcome for our business, right? And that's why we're designing things in very, very firm ways. But the truth is things are moving so fast right now that we need to be able to have more opportunities for people to be able to self-organize and self-determine what they need to do. And that's really what I was getting at is like, I think you're gonna benefit a lot more when you offer that than when you don't. And when you give people a little more open white space and freedom to be able to structure how to do work themselves, than tell them every little thing. Now, I'm speaking in very, very general terms. Some jobs, like if you're operating a machine and people could die if they don't operate it right way, okay, then you need to be very, very programmatic. And there's minimal amounts of entrepreneurialism there in some places. But I do
Right.
think that that's something that is very freeing, and we're all entrepreneurs. Every one of us has, got the ability to be creative and do that in our own ways. And I think if you want to tap into that, extra effort, you want to tap into that, going the extra mile with people, I think that's a key part of it. So I wanted to try to help people just reframe the entrepreneurs and just not someone who's in a garage making a new widget. That, that's one version, but there's many other ways you can be entrepreneurial in your day-to-day. And no matter what you do, if you're a receptionist, you can be entrepreneurial in how you're doing that,
I agree. I think one of the examples I loved is there was and I don't remember the name of the organization, but you shared that if you came up with an idea, they would review your idea and you would get $1,000 to bring to life your business plan, your concept, do the research you needed, and then present that. And then if that was accepted, your idea would be funded and you would be able to move it forward. And I really loved that, because when you think about where organizations invest their money, $1,000 is not a huge amount to invest in a potentially really great idea or concept. And when I worked at Amazon, I have to say, one of the things that I loved about that organization is that they really did take feedback from their line employees, and some of their best innovations come from internal folks raising things up and running with ideas. And so I really liked that idea of bring us a concept, bring us some groundwork, and we'll give you this much to see what you do with it, to flesh it out a little bit more, and then present it on a grander stage and see if you can, bring it to fruition in a different way. So I think if organizations can take that kind of concept, and whatever their budget, maybe they can't afford $1,000, maybe it's 500 or what have you, but just giving
Right.
people autonomy to and inspiration to think innovation. Because I think another thing we've talked about, Sam and I have talked about, is sometimes we think about innovation being, inventing the next iPhone. No, innovation can be something on a much smaller scale that can have a huge impact, both financially, culturally, employee engagement wise. There's so many different things that small innovation can make huge impact. So to give people that, I think that freedom and support is so huge when we think about how we change our organizations going forward.
And it's really clever because it really embraces that future back thinking. And that future back thinking is coming in more and more. And companies like Johnson & Johnson, well, they've been doing it for years, but they've been doing it at a higher level. To give your people that opportunity is just taking it to the next level.
Yeah, I love that. I really do. I think it's incredibly important to allow people to recognize that we believe in them and that we hired them because they're smart, because they have ideas. So let's see what you can do, and give them that runway, instead of hiring great people and then squashing them, because that's not how we do it here. Right.
Yeah. And again, it's our traditional thinking around this that really gets in the way. And managers who say, well, I hired that person, I trained them, I can't have them go do a different project or do somewhere else. I mean, it's human nature and fear of, I'm losing control of my predictable team's outcomes if I let my employee go do some hackathon and go solve something else in another part of the organization. My response to that is, well, if they leave to do something better for the company, isn't that better than they leave? Period. I mean, we're losing all the muscle memory if they go. And having built LinkedIn in the shadows of Google, I mean, good luck with that. I mean, I don't wish that on my worst enemy, that they could outpay me, outbenefit me, outwork environment me. They make more profit in a day than we made in a year. And if we weren't doing something fundamentally, amazing, people could just walk across the street and go work over there. And this is where we came up with the idea that you talked about, Barbie, which is we would have these hackathons, and you didn't have to be an engineer. You could hack anything. You could hack how we use email, or how we meet, or how we have conferences, whatever it was. Or we would always encourage people, please hack anything, that you want to, not just a new product or something. And they would present it. And then if it won, it would, everyone would give it applause, and we would give, we give cash awards. Well, one time we acquired this company, Card Munch, and one of the founders came into my office one. It's one of my favorite stories of how you have to innovate if you are in a war with someone like Google as your neighbor for talent. So Bowe, he comes to my office and says, Steve, I got an idea. Instead of just giving the winner of Hack Day an award, how about we let them go do that time? They stop doing a regular job and they go do it. And I go, that's awesome. I love it. So I bang on the wall. CEO's office is right next to me. He comes over. He goes, "What? What?" He's looking really annoyed that it hit the like get over here button. I go, "Jeff, you know Bowe?" He's like, "Yeah." I go, "Bowe, tell him your idea." So Bowe says, "Here's the idea," and Jeff's like, "Great, do it." And he walks out the office. And Bowe's like, "What? We just made a decision to let people go take their idea if they win and go quit their job and go build that whatever that is." And then Jeff quickly comes back in. He goes, wait, check with the head of engineering first that we've got some sort of like transition timeline. So if someone's key in a project, it's not going to fall. And I could have picked his jaw up off the floor with a shovel. He was in shock that his idea was implemented in 5 minutes of him sharing it with me. The CEO got brought in and boom. And that, it was just like that moved we call them hack days to innovation days. And that was just part of like, that's what you got to do. And, the industry right now that is just really reeling, their deer in the headlights is hospitality, retail, restaurants, hotels have had a captive labor pool forever. And now those people are not easy to find. I'm dialing in from a hotel right now in Atlanta. We checked in 2 days ago, at 1 o'clock in the morning, our flight got delayed. My wife and I get to the front desk and here's how it played out. They said, "Sorry, you don't have a room." I said, "Yes, we do. We have a reservation." They said, "Well, we have a room, but we don't have the cleaning staff to clean it. So we can't put you in that room." And we're just like, our first reaction was, "We'll clean our room. No problem. We got you. Don't worry about it." And they're like, "No, sorry. We've booked you a room at a hotel nearby." And I was like, whoa, here I am, a future of work, a student. And my experience in the day to day is like being impacted 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
They're not going to let me stay in their hotel. They could see the look in my eyes like, "Hey, I've been traveling all day. Like, that's not what I want to hear." And she was not wanting to deliver that news, but they're not able to hire people to clean hotel rooms.
Yeah.
And they don't know how to deal with that yet, And it makes me wonder, like, are we going to lower the working age around the world? Are we going to let people of younger ages enter the workforce because maybe we need more people eligible? I don't know. But structurally, we need to be more creative right now. And it is a moment in time. And this is where we get to the more exciting, futures. Like, we've been given a gift with the pandemic. And yes, it's been brutal for many people and many people have died. And that is just sad. But if we take a look at this opportunity when it comes to work and say, we've got the greatest opportunity to change because more people are open to change now than any time ever, well, let's take advantage of it. Let's not wait to go back to what we used to do. And that's my book is sort of like, here's some blueprints. Go take them. Here's hundreds of people and hundreds of companies and what they're doing. And some of them will work for you and some of them won't. But please, let's not go back to that because it's not going to work in the future, right?
No. And, what I see some companies in hospitality doing now, and I give them a lot of credit, is kind of the Uberization of work, allowing employees to choose their schedules, choose their paydays, bringing in vendors like Daily Pay, right? Where employees can access their earned wages at any time through an app on their phone. And it's not a loan. There's no interest paid. It's simply less than an ATM transfer fee. And I can say, "Oh, I've worked 4 days this week. I just got a flat tire. I don't have the money in my account. Let me transfer $100 right now into my account so I can get the tire fixed and I can get to work." Right? So Daily Pay is like the gold standard, blazing trails out there. And more organizations, especially in the retail and hospitality space, are getting on board with this because it's a phenomenal benefit. I implemented it at my last company, and by far the best thing we ever did. So if you can look at giving people ownership and autonomy and flexibility, so I can choose what my work schedule is going to be, and then I can choose when and how I get paid. Boom. Those are two real game changers. When you think about the number of single parents out there and folks who need flexibility, but they still want to work, but maybe they can't work the traditional schedules, but they can work here, here, and here. Okay, great. Because guess what? There's enough people in the world that someone else is going to want to work the other schedules. So we've got to be creative because the solutions are there. We
Yep.
just have to let go of the rigidity that we've had in the past because it doesn't have to look the same. And so I'm very, very excited. I hope that everyone in the HR space picks up your book, is gifted your book by their boss, is, I know one of my clients, they have a quarterly, or they have a monthly book club, and then they bring in authors. So I will connect you with them because your book would be amazing for their organization.
Awesome.
Everybody needs to read it.
Yeah.
So I'm so grateful to have you with us, Steve, and Sam. As always, love having you join me, and the audience today. Thank you, everyone who shared comments. Again, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do, so that way you can see every one of our episodes from the past and going forward. Steve, I hope you'll come back and join us. I'm looking forward to following all of the amazing things you're doing and the contributions you're making to the world of work and all of us in the HR space. Sam, anything that you'd like to say before we let Steve give his final comments?
Yeah, just thank you. And just to reinforce everything, just if you haven't read the book, read it. Don't read it once, read it again and again and again. Steve really has brought a lot of great thinking together. He's given it cohesion of thought. Yeah. We haven't had that up until now. I'll be giving it to all my clients moving forward too. So Steve, thank you for coming on today.
My pleasure. And thank you both for giving me a platform and for being so supportive. And, I don't know that there's any real like groundbreaking ideas in the book as much as there are connecting dots in ways and trying to make sense of things that, I mean, as Sam, you said, it's like, oh, I never connected those pieces, but yeah, that makes sense. And we're all feeling a little stuck right now. And we all have responsibility for trying to getting ourselves unstuck and the people that we're with. And it fills my heart when I have people say what you guys have said, which is, wow, this is really, it was refreshing with some new perspectives. And that's what I love to do. I love to give new ideas, and that's what we do in HR. I think we were just sort of like try to look at the world a little differently and help people get through the difficult times. So I'm looking forward to coming back on your show. And I feel like we just talked about 5% of what I wanted to get through. And there's so much more here. So let's get that on the calendar. And again, thank you guys so much for your support. And those of you who are listening, if you're in an organization and you're feeling like my leadership doesn't get it, they're a little bit stuck, I got you. Bring me in there. I will go and I will shake them up. And you can say, wow, that guy's a little bit crazy, huh? But I can help you sort of shake the tree a little bit. And that's sort of the role that I have in the world right now. So I welcome those opportunities.
I love that. And Steve, how can people find you? If they want to bring you in, they want to hire you, how can we do that?
Sure.
And I'll type it in as a comment on the scroll bar here.
Well, there's this site called LinkedIn. It's pretty good. You can find me there. I'm very responsive, but stevecadigan.com is another easy way to find me. And there's lots of good material. I have a ton of YouTubes up there. I have a regular channel on TikTok, which is my name, just Steve Cadigan. On TikTok, and have some really funny true stories from corporate America, just more trying to poke fun at sometimes we take ourselves a little too seriously with work. And if you get to know me, I'm pretty much a very sarcastic person at heart, and I don't know how you avoid being that in human resources, honestly. No. given what we get to see. But just the last closing thoughts here, what I said right before we wrapped up, which is we have the opportunity of a lifetime right now, and to rebuild something better. And shame on us if we don't take advantage of that. And all of you who are talent leaders or people leaders, you've got the recipe right here. Like, let's go. Let's challenge old assumptions and rebuild something better. Because I think there's lots of options, and you don't have to be perfect at it. Just a little bit better than your competition. That's it. And then we can build on that going forward. So thanks again, Barbie and Sam, so much for having me.
Oh, thank you. This was a pleasure. And we will definitely have you back. Maybe we should create like a series of 4 segments so we can get through all the different amazing elements of the book. I think that our audience would probably really enjoy that.
We will sort that.
Great.
All right. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Remember, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can watch this at any time. Share it with your teams. That's another thing that I love about posting these videos to YouTube. A lot of HR leaders are going to the channel and sharing these videos with their teams, which is a tremendous and free learning opportunity. So thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Take care.